Okay, hi guys. Right, let us go on to section 3 of the action document, and we've already touched a little bit on this, the whole point of cost-cutting issues. So as we saw at the very beginning, this is the section of the action document where the instructions are least likely to be complied with. So what is a bit disappointing to see is that lessons learned are not being used to inform the design of the action. The whole point of identifying lessons learned in the action document is not to just identify them for the sake of identifying them, but to identify them with a view to informing or guiding the design of the action that it concerns. Another thing that was quite interesting is the understanding of lessons learned is they tend to be very general and drawn from a limited range of sources. I mean, if I pick up our sort of made up project Y here, you know, lessons learned section 3.1, what we have is the first comment, and you do see this quite a bit. This is the first EU program in support of the VET sector in the framework of bilateral cooperation with country Y, etc. So immediately it's like the EU hasn't worked in this section before, therefore there will be no lessons learned. You know, there's a need to look beyond sort of specific EU experience within that sector, within that country. There could be EU sector experience from other countries, or there could be EU experience within the country in other sectors. So it's to broaden the base or the sources, the range of sources of lessons learned. And also there is a tendency to only present lessons learned as if they always have to be positive. So you rarely find you do, but very rarely find lessons learned that refer to previous failures and why we're not going to do something the way we did it before. So in essence, in summary, lessons learned in many cases, it fails to capture the essence of the lesson learned, like what worked and what didn't and why. It was interesting to look at follow-on actions, which were quite representative in the batch I looked at. So there you would really expect to see a strong, you know, a lot of detailed information on lessons learned feeding into the follow-on action, but surprisingly that was not the case. Now that is not to say that it didn't inform the decision, but it wasn't highlighted or explained in any way. So let's look a little bit in more detail here. So what sort of weaknesses did we find here? Okay, interesting. Now, 3.1 is lessons learned, and section 3.2 is complementarity, synergy, and donor coordination. So what you're finding is a lot of donors or other actions referred to in section 3.2, i.e. coordination issues, they're not referred to in lessons learned. In other words, you have a whole series of actors referred to in section 3.2 as being active in the sector, and yet when you're coming to section 3.1, there's no reference to any lessons learned that might be arising from their experience, which is again another example of this not joining up the dots that we've been discussing. So, you know, LL from other actions described in section 3.2, that's 21 out of the 31. That's a lot of the action documents not referring to the work being carried out by donors identified in other sections. So here, yes, it's sort of generic lessons learned, not specific to the action at hand. There's, you know, no reference to evidence. This is one of the requirements listed in the relevant section in the template. Let me just get it out here. You know, the first comment is, and this is during identification, indicate the evidence on the basis of which the envisaged action has been designed. So that's the first comment made in the instructions template for this section. There were very few cases where that was being done. Well, 10 where there was no reference at all to any evidence. LL from previous phase, so this obviously refers to all those actions actions that were follow-on not being referred to. I've just gone through that. So here, this is sort of, you know, sometimes lessons learned are again interpreted as just a description of the overall sort of problematic. Here, I referred to this previously as well, limited sourcing, so not looking beyond the EU and not looking beyond the sector. So limited sourcing of lessons learned, and not, you know, sometimes identifying lessons learned, but not explaining clearly how they have been incorporated into the actual proposed action, and limited scope of lessons learned. So they were some of the weaknesses found in the sample analyzed. Complementarity, synergy, and donor coordination. Actions listed here not seen as a source. I've mentioned that to you already. Yes, disappointingly, complementarity, synergy, and donor coordination. Often what you find is, again, there's a listing tendency. So just listing other actions rather than, you know, explaining really how synergies will be created with these other actions and jointly planned actions, etc. And you would sort of imagine that this is where the added value of EU support would be particularly evident. Okay, here we go. Analysis of section 3.2. So, you know, in 24 of the action documents, it's, you know, very purely descriptive really of what others are doing, not going into how synergies will be created. Somewhat similarly, planned actions with other interventions not clearly spelt out. One of the requests or requirements in the instruction template is that there should be some reference to harmonized support for capacity development. This is very rarely referred to. Government coordination of the sector is also requested here, even though, as you pointed out, Eric, it's also, or I think it was Tony, sorry, it was also requested in the PPA analysis 1.1.1, but often it's not dealt with here. And again, we have this issue of the information being put in the wrong place. Sometimes information that appears here should really be in section 3.1 or in the contextual analysis. Okay, cross-cutting. And other issues. What was very interesting was, first of all, what is a cross-cutting issue? In the sample of 31 action documents, I came across these. Institution building, these are listed as cross-cutting issues. Institution building, capacity development, good governance, social cohesion, peace building, health education, promotion of interinstitutional coordination, developing a sustainable financial mechanism, promotion of evidence-based decisions, and even down to competitiveness of Asian private sector and service delivery. All of these were listed as cross-cutting issues. Now, in fairness, they were cross-cutting issues for that particular project, but we need to be clear when we are discussing cross-cutting issues, what exactly is it we are talking about. The action document template, as you all know, refers to three. That's RBA, results-based approach, rights-based approach, I beg your pardon, gender and environment, climate change. So what is the overall comment on cross-cutting issues? I would say, in general, paid lip service. So we frequently come across terms such as environment will be taken into account, or gender will be taken into account, or human rights will be taken into account, without really detailing how, not saying, well, in what way. And what you said, Valerina, totally correct, is mentioned here, but no evidence of how these issues are going to be dealt with in other sections of the document, i.e. not mainstreamed throughout the document. So all three, when I say this, is all three together, RBA, gender and environment, CC, are rarely covered. Gender is the one that's most frequently referred to, RBA very rarely. And what you find as well, which is no surprise really, is that actions related to the environment obviously refer to environmental mainstreaming, but they don't refer to gender and or RBA. Similarly, actions targeting women or women's issues or human rights actions, they address gender equality and RBA respectively, but not the other cross-cutting issues. So there's a tendency just to zoom in on the one that is most relevant and consider the others not to be relevant. Then this point that even when they are addressed, cross-cutting issues, there's a lack of consistency. This is the point you were making, Lorena, precisely, is that even though it's referred to in one section, you don't see it cutting across the whole action, so not coming up in activities, not coming up in indicators reflecting this mainstream. And then something that was a bit surprising was the inconsistency between the markers, the CRISDAC form. So something would be ticked at the beginning of the action document. So let's say you would have gender equality, including women in development, ticked as a significant objective or main objective, and then not referred to elsewhere in the text. So the sort of inconsistencies. Cross-cutting, okay, so these are sort of more broken down, superficial treatment, not clear how it will actually be mainstreamed. This was quite frequent. No reference to RBA at all. You can see this is what this is about, 12 of the action document, no reference at all. This is, you know, tick, this is to do with the boxes, ticked as not relevant when really it is relevant. And what we also found is you did have certain cases where RBA and gender were actually mainstreamed across the document, but strangely in the actual section dealing with it, they weren't. So again, back to this issue of information sometimes being there but not being in the right place. This is the final section, guys. I'm aware of the time, and I want to give you some, okay, 10 minutes left. I want to give you an opportunity for a bit of a chat as well. So this is really where you're getting your objectives, results, options. This is in the, obviously in the identification phase, not the formulation. So this section really in general is more likely to comply with instructions, 42% of cases than to not comply. I won't go into too much detail on this because I know that the LFM team aren't out there, and this is really of most interest to you. But what we found were, you know, for example, in a number of cases that the overall objective or the specific objectives weren't grounded in the rationale. So again, there's a missing link between section 1.1.3, so in other words, the priority area for support, and 4.1, what you're going to do about it. So that link was missing in, or was not clear in 11 of the cases. Here, this is, you know, the overall objective was beyond the scope of an action. So you have, for example, what am I referring to? An action targeting, you know, the conclusion of a peace process, for example. I mean, that's beyond the scope of any project. Outputs not leading to outcomes, outcomes not leading to impacts, outputs broader than specific objective. Overall specific objective formulated as activities indicated. So incorrect formulation of outputs, misunderstanding of the different levels of the intervention or results change, should I say. Let us see. So these sections, remember at the beginning I said there's a difference between the information required in identification and formulation phase, so initial ADs and full ADs. So these three, 4.2, 4.3, and 5.8, are only in the full action documents. They're not in the initial action documents. So we're talking about 24. I will go quickly through this. Perhaps I'll just focus more on 4.3. So these are the overall results. This is based on 24 action documents, now the full action documents. So here again, you see complying with instructions. Here, very, very weak. This is in many cases still grappling with the issue of what exactly is required in terms of information in the intervention logic. Most projects made a stab at it, hence partially complying with instructions and then not complying at all with instructions. But certainly a lot of confusion around the whole issue of what comes in here, what information needs to be put in here. And then here again, quite weak to whole performance and monitoring. In many cases, this was just the standard text was just left as is. Let's not really look at activities. I don't think that's very informative for anyone. So intervention logic, what was going on here? So in these two, the two sort of main weaknesses here, and what you found is that, and this clearly indicates that there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about what exactly the intervention logic is. So here you have 15 cases where most of the text is simply a summary of the action, so it's a representation of the results chain. Here, key assumptions, which is a really key element of the intervention logic, the key assumptions along the results chain not spelt out, no reference to evidence, and then here's some less important issues such as, you know, alternative description of the action provided here, or text indeed left blank. Okay, finally, this is the last one is LFM. Again, my analysis is strictly based on the requirements laid out in the template. So let's see, indicators not linked with EU results framework or programming. This is required by the template. Indicators not gender disaggregated, required by the template. Targets missing or poorly defined, not realistic, baseline data missing. Indicators on the wrong level, so this constant confusion between output, outcome, impact, etc. Non-measurable indicators, these are the main weaknesses that were found in the 31 LFMs, well, less than 31, some were blank, so I think there's about 29 or something. Okay, and voila, thank you. I don't know whether there are questions out there. I will hand over to Lucy now. So thanks very much, and happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay, bye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. There was one question that Sarah asked. She's gone now, but since we're recording this session, she may want to just find the answer, her answer at the very end of the session. So she was asking who is filling out the action documents. Is it mainly staff or consultants? And then, so if Karen, if you can answer that, but then there's also Geraldo who has a question. So Geraldo, if you want to just click on the talk button and ask your question.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Could you put your microphone up a little bit, please?
Yeah, okay. So my question is related to the logic of intervention. I know it's usually a weak paragraph. So Karen, I would like to know what would be a tips that we could give to delegations or consultants that are the authors of the first draft. How to improve this this paragraph in particular.
Which paragraph, sorry, which paragraph, Geraldo?
Logic of intervention.
Ah, okay. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was being provided with some technical input there. Geraldo, yes, exactly. There is work totally that there is a need for more information to be provided on intervention logic. As you know, you're one of the trainers on the whole LFA, etc. We try to incorporate as much information in there. Within the Commission, within 06, they are, I think it's 06, they are working on guidance, improved guidance, more detailed guidance, should I say, on precisely what the intervention logic is and how to fill out this section. And that is, I have seen a draft of it, and it's pretty near completion. So it's a very detailed report. It's Bridget, I think you know Bridget Dillon. she's been working on that. So I agree, yes, there's definitely more information. So that guidance that's being elaborated by the Commission, and then it's incorporated obviously into our training as well. I hope that answers your question. You can come back to me if it doesn't. And I've been told Sarah was asking a question, who fills out the action documents? That's the EU staff would fill out, I'm assuming. Action documents, obviously they rely on documents such as formulation missions, identification missions that is carried out by consultants, but the actual completion of the action documents is carried out by EU staff, either in delegation or here in Brussels. Okay, so I hope I've answered those questions. Any other questions or comments indeed? Or
okay, I think there's Blarina. Yeah, Blarina, if you want to use your talk button, please.
Yes, hello. In fact, I was trying to ask a question directly to Eve for this. It's regarding editing of this existing AD instruction. There is simply in page 2, second bullet point, the reference, it's old and it has been replaced by a new council document. And I wonder, Eve, if it is possible to do this editing, and if it is, whom should I send the information to? Of course, after clearing it with DEVCO B1.
Yes, let's see if Eve is going to type something, or if Eve, if you want to, if you want to speak, your microphone is open. You just need to click on talk. Eve. Okay. Well, we'll.
I think Eve is typing.
Oh yes, I can. Okay. So in the meantime, okay. Okay, so if you can see in the box, Eve has responded. Is there anyone else that has either questions or comments? We have a couple of more minutes left. Okay, who's Tony? Yes, Tony, please take the microphone. Need to click on talk.
Hello. Right, you can hear me now. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you very much, Karen and Lucy, for the presentation. That's very useful, and for sure we look forward to receiving the presentation as well. Can you briefly tell us what happens next?
What happens next? I haven't actually got that far in my planning, to be honest. I don't know. We will discuss. I'll discuss that internally with Lucy and the team and see what we're going to do. But I get okay. One thing that's important, actually, Tony, is you kindly inputted into. For those of you who don't know, we are sort of developing a good and a bad model action document. So you were sent those. They're still kind of drafts. People, I know some of the trainers are already using these or sections of them in their training. So I guess the main thing is it's not for me or anyone else to dictate how to incorporate, you know, this information into your own training. But I guess on the basis of these findings, and we can get that information to you, to incorporate this, you know, be aware of this in your training, that there is clearly a need for clarity on some of these issues so that we can explain in greater detail when we have the opportunity of being face-to-face with people responsible for the drafting of ADs. other than that, that's really where we're at the moment. I would hope to finalize the good and the bad model, or whatever way you want to call them, the weak and the strong. Then people can use those, or indeed, I mean, I know that Eric and Sarah used another action document by way of examples. It's good to use, but obviously you have to be quite careful and aware of sensitivities. It's not very pleasant to hand out anyone's work as in a critical fashion. So what we've done with these two wide works is we've obviously disguised them. They're not actually real actions. We have taken bits from various documents. So just to be aware of the sensitivities around that front, obviously. But it's ongoing work. Obviously, the Commission is working on that. I mean, Eve is probably the person best placed to answer that. That's it for me. Anyone else got a comment or want to ask a question?
We're almost out of time, so maybe if there's one last question, just to reiterate that we will make all of the reference documents and this presentation and the recording available. We'll be most probably putting all of this on the MKS trainers group on Capacity for Dev. Well, we will be doing that. So I'll send information for those of you who are not members yet of the trainers group, because this is really the place where you can get all of the information. So this will be sending along to you. So last opportunity for a question or comment. All right. Well, on this, I'd like to thank you all for participating, and thanks to Karen for her baptism of the webinar, and thank you to Fouad for his technical assistance, and thanks to all of you for participating, for being there, and yes, we'll see you all next time on the next webinar. Thank you.